Welcome to Let's Talk Climate and today's topic, Mother Nature Knows, Engaging Communities on Natural Climate Solutions. Thank you so much for being with us. And joining with us is our amazing guest we have today, Eboné Lockett, who is an educator and has done a lot of work on climate justice and natural solutions in communities in North Carolina, Connecticut, and in Africa. First, I want to also acknowledge that I'm in Charlotte on the land of the Sugaree and Catawba nations, and our government carried out forced removal of the Catawba to acquire land. I want to honor the Catawba and Sugaree who still reside here and who demonstrate talents and gifts amidst a backdrop of ongoing colonialism and oppression. Now on to our discussion of natural climate solutions and how to engage the community in them. So we have a real treat today. Eboné Lockett, not only is she a climate activist and an educator, but she is also a spoken word artist. And she has prepared something especially for our session today. And so Eboné, I am going to turn it over to you to hear your original work. And thank you so much for honoring us with that today.
And thank you, Jennifer, for having me. And I want to thank you for that wonderful introduction, especially the honoring of the First Nations and the tribal lands. Today I have written and will read for you, Sample Mother Earth's Soil. And that's the title of this piece I wrote especially for this webcast. Sample Mother Earth's Soil. It is said that the only sure way to tell if soil is contaminated is to sample the soil and have a certified laboratory test it. What laboratory certifies the lived experiences of the marginalized and neglected? What laboratory certifies the urban waters prejudicially infected? What laboratory certified the waters of Flint? What laboratory measures in dollars and cents all that was stolen, along with the land, all that has been taken, along with the literal breath of mankind? What laboratory certified the surface of the ground that has been heavily mined? What laboratory certified the particulate matter lodged deep down in the lungs of our darker hued and economically skewed children and families, all tokens of collateral damage, along with the wind and the trees? How long have we been waiting to breathe fresh air? Sample Mother Earth's soil. History holds the truth there. Before gold struck, during the Trail of Tears, after urban renewal, what laboratory certified the stories that this sampled soil carries? The many marginalized voices that have been silenced and buried. We are the lab technicians. We are Mother Earth's clinicians. We must cure her soil's contamination and fertilize seeds of hope devoid of discrimination. We must plant trees under whose shade we may never rest. We must honor her air because it is our life-affirming breath. How long have we been waiting to breathe fresh air? Sample Mother Earth's soil. History holds truth there. Thank you.
Wow, we definitely want a copy of that. That was really perfect. What a great introduction to our topic today. And thank you so much for reminding us that one of the ways that we can engage on climate solutions is through art, through spoken word, through music, through sculpture and painting. So thank you so much for reminding us of that. Sorry, I got a little teary.
Now I feel it, and thank you for allowing me that opportunity, because true to your words, art is really one way that we can evoke empathy and really spark action. And so it is really the first language that I learned, and it was one of the languages that kept me going when things got seemingly unbearable.
Well, I know that you have you've been a lifelong educator, and one of your passions is to work with and empower women in a number of ways. And you've been doing some great work connecting women to that great natural solution for energy, which is the solar industry. And I'd love to hear you tell the story about how you got interested in working with women, how you learned about the solar industry needing more diversity, and how you've worked to bring change there.
Thank you for that question, Jennifer. So it started in 2017 when I was teaching in the classroom at Cato Middle College High School, and there was an opportunity presented by We Share Solar in collaboration with Wells Fargo and in collaboration with the late Jim, who was the former Duke Energy CEO, and his wife. And they provided an opportunity where young people could learn about solar energy and its clean solution, but also beyond that, could become really ramp up their servant leadership. So through the experience, there are solar suitcases that young people learn about solar energy. And then those solar suitcases are then deployed to Kenya. We were paired with a refugee camp in Kenya, particularly, but they're deployed all over countries in Africa. And this particular experience was so meaningful because, again, not only are we learning about a global aspect of service, but we're also learning how we can take that clean energy and help bring local solutions. And so in that experience, I was really paired with a teacher, a female teacher, and the refugee camp was actually they had an all girls section. And so the solar suitcases that the students at Cato Middle College High School built were then sent over to this female camp. And they also had an extension with the Women in Sustainable Energy, which is the WISE program in Africa. And they are about training women, and especially, when you think about the cultural aspect of the country, of some of the countries in Africa, where women don't typically even have that as an option, but they were training women to become solar installers. And they were installing in hospitals and facilities that were deficient in lighting sources. And so not only were we able to communicate and see firsthand the tangible profit and the human and social capital we were building, in that experience, we were able to train 3 Latinx females in my classroom and 2 African-American females and 2 Caucasian males. So we were majority women in this experience, and we did it as an after-school club. But the first year we were selected, we were like, this is something we want to do forever and ever. And even after leaving the classroom, I remain, connected to that organization just because of the power of that work. And so in learning about it, I realized, okay, let me, think global, act local. What's happening in our local industry? And so I started to do more research and realized through the Solar Foundation report, their natural solar census report, that of the entire industry, which we're talking over 200 plus jobs and one of the fastest clean energy solutions in the entire industry, you had an 8% representation of women. And you pare that down and disaggregate that, there's a 2% representation of women of color. And so for me, that disparity was just another inequity that I couldn't stand by and see and not do something about. And so after leaving the classroom in October of 2019, I continued the program and I really made it a little more robust. So when we talk about art, our experiences are really about engaging, preparing, and positioning young solutionaries, because we know their issues, but how do we solve these issues? Because that's always our focus. How can we be a solution for some of this disparity and some of the inequities that we see? And so we take a real integrated science, technology, reading and writing, engineering, arts, architecture, and math approach to teaching, learning, leading, and serving. And so we just really understand that holistic perspective is necessary.
That is such a great story of building on that learning and finding solutions and plugging a hole. And I don't know if you saw last week, I just want to read briefly, the Department of Energy actually is announcing a new effort to support solar energy deployment in underserved communities and to build a diverse, skilled workforce. They're putting $15.5 million of new funding into initiatives to help families and businesses that have been left behind in the energy transition and to reap the benefits of cheap power and highly skilled jobs. So it's DOE's Solar Energy Technologies Office that is going to leverage technical assistance, community solar, and workforce development programs to tackle these challenges. So if anybody is listening, is interested in finding out about those grants, we're going to put that in the chat that you can find out more about what the Department of Energy is doing. So it's
Wow, thank you.
good to know we have support at the federal level.
Absolutely. And I will have to say, like, one of the things that really sparked an interest in me, and is in part of our training, we were able to bring in Cassandra Devine, who's an African American female who works for Wells Fargo in their sustainability department and lead some work there. And again, having the young women see and be able to see that representation in the field was pivotal. It was one of those things that let you know, okay, one, we're on the right track. And two, we can think about how we bring those solutions even more hyper local, as you said, in those underserved communities who don't understand sometimes how something like solar energy can help when it comes to clean energy solutions in their community.
And cleaner air and cheaper electricity. All of those.
Absolutely.
All those.
And absolutely. We were even able to build on that to help the elementary school, which is a Title I school, become a solar school. And so they were the second CMS school to be awarded a NC Solar Green Power Grant. And now not only are these young people going to have the kits at their hands, they're going to have, weather monitoring systems and everything that can make learning more hands-on and tangible.
And that's great. I remember you talking about that one of our climate ambassador trainings, and the teaching young people, letting them be engaged and part of it is so important to paving the way to the future. And I know that you have done a number of things that are involving natural solutions with the community and really engage the community, kind of all ages. And there's another area that I know you've been working on that is, again, nature and the soil, like your poem talked about, and that is community gardens. We know that that's healthy local food. It brings nutrition, fresh fruits and vegetables, less meat, and also reducing transportation emissions. But tell us the story of your involvement. I know I've seen pictures of your community garden and different, bringing people together, and tell us again how that got started and some of the benefits you've seen from that work.
I'd have to say, Jennifer, that really got started in my own personal life and lived experience, because we grew up with my grandfather, who's an immigrant from Jamaica, and my grandmother, who's a migrant worker. And we grew up with trees in our backyard, so we could go out and pick apples, and we could go out and understand how when we nourished the earth, it nourished and replenished us. And so, you lose your way when you're in urban sites sometimes from that growing up and that tutelage. But coming back into this work really kind of reminded me of that. It was like coming home. And so there are many spaces in both Connecticut where we have an office and in Charlotte where we have an office where we work that really are devoid of green spaces and devoid of places where people can have access to healthy food, and people can understand that, you can grow what you eat and really mitigate some of the health disparities that exist. And so when we saw the void, we just stepped in. And there were also, it is not a singular thing. That's why this work is so important, because we stand united in it. We work with other partners such as Men of Destiny, who helped build and raise the garden at MLK. We've helped support other gardens throughout the city, but particularly in neighborhoods where there are food deserts, and particularly in spaces where people feel like everything they eat has to come from a grocery store. And the nearest grocery store is, miles away and not really accessible. So maybe they're eating at fast food restaurants. And then understanding even about community science, because if you say, okay, now if you plant certain things, you can also help the environment and you can also help the air quality. That learning is invaluable. And each one teach one. As we're teaching and training, they're going to be able to teach and train their families. And so we just exponentially grow the movement where we understand that we have to give and nourish our earth in order for it to give and nourish us.
You mentioned MLK, and for folks who aren't from Charlotte, that's a middle school? Is it MLK?
It is Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School, and it's in the Hidden Valley area. One of the areas that our city has deemed as an opportunity zone, because they're a corridor of opportunity, because there are a lot of factors that play into what some people call underprivilege, but it's really about not having access and not having opportunity. And so when we can bring access and opportunity to areas that are not, they have a ton of assets, but they don't necessarily know how to massage those assets, how to grow those assets. And we just walk hand in hand with them. We just serve alongside them to build a community that can nourish not only the human element, but our non-human relatives as well.
You know, you mentioned Hidden Valley, and again, for folks who don't know Charlotte, we have what's called the Crescent, which is an area that was formerly redlined, that is low income. And also Hidden Valley happens to be near some major highways, Interstate 85, North Tryon, a lot of pollution. And one of the things that we've seen in polling data is that most people in the United States still don't know what redlining is, and they don't understand what climate justice and environmental racism are. And I wonder if you, I mean, you've touched on it quite a bit. Were you surprised at, I think it was an EDF poll that that indicated that people don't know about it still. Were you surprised? And how have you kind of blended that into your work to help educate people about that disparity?
So I know redlining has become a more prevalent term that people understand, but when we talk about really making the connections between the social determinants of health, that where you live can determine how you live and what you're exposed to, and whether or not you have trees to help you with oxygenated air, that is a very intentional design to make sure that some people have and some people have not. And really putting those things together and showing the trajectory that the crescent and the wedge is not just a geographical distinction or a geographical fault line or divisive feature. It is actually a life expectancy and a lifeline that some people don't have access to. And for me, it's really about, again, that community. How can we say we are a common humanity if we intentionally give access to some and deny access to others? If we intentionally build beside highways and pollutants that we know are going to kill people, it's going to cause higher asthma rates, it can cause cancer, all of these things. And we just see people as collateral damage. We can't have a common humanity if we see people and our earth as a collateral damage.
You know, I heard we had a speaker for our Florida group from a conservative perspective, from a conservative Christian perspective, who described it as, if you're supposed to love your neighbor, why is it okay to dump pollution on your neighbor, right? Why is it okay to put toxins in your neighbor's soil? That's not the way that God told us to take care of each other. That was a really interesting perspective. And it's still something we need to learn about. We need education about those conscious policies that led to that redlining, that led to fewer green assets and healthy areas in low income, mostly Black and brown communities. And I know that you also, because you were motivated by educating people, you started a new subgroup of our Climate Ambassador group. And so I want to talk about Climate Ambassador training, because for those of you watching, Eboné is one of the people I hold up as an example of how our training can really help people become speakers and educators on climate change. She joined our training for our North Carolina Climate Ambassadors in July of last year. And the very next training we did in October, she was one of the trainers. She learned, put so many pieces together of things she was already doing, and now she is a terrific voice for climate justice. And so I wonder if you could tell the story of what got you interested in our ambassador training program, and what would you tell the people about why it's so important, and then what or how did you then start a climate justice group when you started to see that more people were interested in helping?
So I would have to say relationships was originally what got me connected. So I had a prior relationship with June from Clean Air Carolina, and June had told me about the North Carolina ambassadorship, and I was like, this is so aligned with my recent awakening, because the reason I left the classroom in October of 2019 is because I had gone down to Alabama to the Equal Justice Initiative, their opening of their monument and memorial, and really understood then the connection. Like you always kind of understand that something's not quite right. There's some discrepancy with redlining, there's green lining. And like you said, we don't make those connections, that if we're depriving one group of people of something and giving access and higher opportunity to another group, there's going to be an imbalance. There's going to be a severe imbalance that causes life-threatening consequences. It has a more than just an intangible impact, but a very real tangible impact. And so I learned about lynching. And again, some people say, well, what does lynching have to do with climate justice? But I was actually teaching on the soil in the vicinity of where one of the lynchings had occurred. One of the two lynchings in Charlotte, North Carolina had occurred. And I had never heard the story. I had never heard of Willie McDaniel and the life that was taken from this tenant farmer because he and his wife's pay from the farm landlord. And so when I thought about, again, the physical soil, but as well that spiritual soil that's wrestling, that thing that we have to reconcile and come to grips with, it was then that I really understood the connections between climate justice and environmental justice and racial justice and judicial justice. And, the fact that if you're born in a certain zip code, the probability that you can come out of or move away from a situation that is not viable for anyone, it was a calling. It was like the knock on the door that said, you have to get closer, more proximate to the people. You have to help people who look like you, who come from experiences like you do, understand that connection and be ready to move and act on that understanding. And so when I found out that the climate ambassadorship was doing just that, it was really important for me to help diversify the voices and the stories that were being told and how those stories were being told. And, the front line and the fence line communities that are often, they're bearing the brunt of climate and environmental justice, but their voices are nowhere in the narratives. And so again, with my artistic and creative lens, I was like, how can I be a part of the solution? And the climate ambassadorship was one of the ways that I saw myself able to be a clear part of the solution.
And again, for those watching, the other thing that Eboné did was start a subgroup of our ambassadors, starting with the ambassadors, to really talk about what climate justice is and those connections that as soon as you start talking about, higher rates of asthma and higher rates of cancer and people who can't afford air conditioning, suffering from heat stroke because of the energy burden, when you start connecting the dots and you look at school absences and workplace absences, people understand that, but they have to be told a story. And one of the things I love about you, Eboné, is how good you are at telling that story, about making it accessible for people so that it really brings them into your personal experience. It connects to their own, and then it connects to what they know about their community. And the study that Eboné referenced about Charlotte, it was a study out of Harvard that looked at the chance, if you are in the bottom 20% of income, the chance you will get to the top 20%. And Charlotte was the lowest city out of the 50 cities studied. And so that really spurred a lot of awareness and action. We're still struggling. We still know there's a lot of work to do, but the work that you're doing, Eboné, is really helping more people understand, and also solutions, the solutions that you talk about. What are some of the other things? I mean, there's so many amazing things that you're doing in terms of, connecting people to the earth and helping in that growth and that awareness. What are some of the aspirations you have for your climate justice group?
So one of the aspirations is that we will be able to hear from more voices on the front line and the fence line, that we will be able to capture their stories and really not only, it's not about, sympathy, it's about empathy, with us being able to really capture the stories in a way that move us to action, that spurs something in us, that say, although I'm a single person, I have a responsibility, and I'm going to be responsible to that responsibility. And then I can join a group of people who get it, and we can act together. And that people power is really something that I have seen firsthand can move mountains. And so one of the things that I really am passionate about is including more people of a First Nation, more tribal voices in this narrative. And I see that happening more and more. I recently was among a group where, I had never seen this before. Equity and voice and narrative was centered in the environmental conversation. And oftentimes when I used to go into spaces about environmental climate justice, there were a lot of people who did not look like me, a lot of people who could not identify with my story. But for me, it's personal because I remember Sandra, we were in elementary school, and I can't remember the exact grade, but I know we were in elementary school, so I couldn't have been more than, 10, 11. And we saw one of our friends die from asthma. And it hasn't left me. It can't leave me. But again, the older you get and the more you realize, wait a minute, this is something that sits and lives and grows and germinates in our environment. And this is something we can do something about. It's like all the Sanders of the world deserve to have us do something about it.
You mentioned that story, I think, during one of our trainings, and it was on the playground, right? That your friend passed away.
It was.
And
we had to watch the medic try to revive her and couldn't.
Yeah. And asthma, we know from our training that Black children are 4 times as likely to die from asthma as white children. And that's, really connects back to that whole environmental racism and the climate justice that we need to be more aware of, and telling those stories. But we also have hope, and we know that we have solutions, and that we are putting our hands to the earth and to the solar panels, and really bringing about solutions. And I want to ask you, since this is this is May, it's Mother's Day month, and you do a lot of work with women, and I would just love to hear you talk about what you see in the strength of women and the community of women. And our whole theme, Mother Nature knows, Earth is a mother. What in that gives you hope and inspiration?
Well, it gives me hope that we are holding one another, and we are really, like, this year. I mean, even amidst the pandemic, when things have been, exposed and exacerbated, I have been able to be held and cradled, and I have been able to cradle and hold so many others, that I'm hopeful that there are people who are finally, if they didn't get it before, they're getting it now, and they're ready to move. They're saying, what can I do? How can we serve our human and non-human relatives? What are some of the ways that we can pay it forward and make sure that even if we are not here to see the fruits of that labor, that we're planting and sowing seeds that are going to be productive? We're turning the soil and making sure that it's nutrient rich, so that when our children and our children's children are out there playing, they have better air quality, they have a more just and equitable world. And I see women really taking the leadership in that. And that's not to take anything away from our husbands and brothers, and everyone who was also standing by our side. But I see women powerfully standing in their womanness, and I say WOMB, womanness, because we carry life, we give life, we affirm life, and it is just a beautiful blessing to know that you're not in it alone. So it is that hope that we continue to uplift our humanity. Right now, we're working with a group that's working across, a group of young solutionaries ages 16 to 21 that's working across the globe. We have solutionaries from Ghana, Cape Verde. We have solutionaries here across the United States. We have solutionaries in Jamaica, and we have solutionaries in Moldova. And they're thinking about climate solutions. They're thinking about, the water in Jamaica when they have water shortages. What are some of the things they can do to help with that when they have, air pollution issues? So the more we think about and develop this sensitivity in our young people, I think, the young are giving me so much hope. They're giving me so much hope. And as a mother, I love it. I hold them dear and near to my heart, because I know that they will change this world.
I really appreciate you lifting up the diversity of mothers' voices and the First Nations as well. And I'm sure that our ecoAmerica assistants will throw this in the chat, but we had a number of people in the First Nations speak at our annual climate summit. And I think most of them are women, but they have done amazing things around climate solutions for years. And I think of the example in California of the areas that are managed by First Nations and the cultural burnings that they did of some of the underbrush that actually prevented larger forest fires, and how the California Fire Department is finally starting to learn from them because they have solutions they've been doing for years. And this is the thing about diversity and inclusion, is that we don't leave ideas on the table. We bring good ideas and solutions together, because we know that a good idea can come from anyone. It doesn't matter their gender, race, creed, height, color, whatever, that lots of people have great solutions, and we need to include them, and we need to be consciously looking to include them. So
Absolutely.
what I would ask, and we're getting close to the end of our time, but what I know that a lot of people listening do work in climate solutions, but are trying to reach those voices of Black and Brown communities and First Nations. So what would you tell them is the best way to reach out to make sure that they are including those voices and that they are collaborating with them?
I would say like the very first thing is proximity. You cannot, come from the outside and think that you have all of the solutions. You've got to first listen. And I think, one of the greatest gifts is listening, because when you listen, you'll hear, and I mean truly hear, the aspirations, you'll hear the humanity, you'll hear the joy, you'll hear the love. You might also hear the pain, but all those other things will come as a result of listening. So I say the first thing to do is, when you're reaching out, is get proximate. So you can't reach out from a neighborhood 5 miles over. You've got to go into the neighborhood that you want to reach. You've got to sit with the people and listen. And you've got to really listen with an authentic and open heart. And you've got to be willing to really, really say, okay, I understand that this is your experience. Even if I haven't had this experience, by hearing your story, I feel like I can empathize better with your experience. And I really want to find ways to amplify that. So a lot of us have platforms that, the indigenous people may not have, because of the way they've been forced into certain, situations. So sometimes it's relinquishing our platform, saying, here is an open invitation for us to amplify your voice, your story, and do that wholeheartedly. Do that without judgment. So that is definitely one of the first things I'd say.
No, that's great advice. And I have one more question about the work you're doing broadly, because your organization is called Harvesting Humanity. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the name, and then, how you empower people. And I guess you call it solutionaries. Is that?
Yes, solutionaries.
Because
Because we know we all have issues, and I will have to say, it's not my word. I just adopted it. I heard it and I adopted it. I heard it from We Share at first, but they also heard it from someone else. But I adopted it because it's really our focus. We definitely want to learn about and understand and interrogate and dismantle those issues. But at the end of the day, that's not where we want to stop. We want to say, okay, here is the issue, and how do we innovate solutions to those issues? And the reality is, we can't think of people as problems. We have to understand that people are people. We may have issues, but we can find solutions to those issues. But if we see people as issues, we lose our humanity. We lose our humanity. And so it's always for me to maintain, to harvest, to sow, and it's a labor intensive process. It's not something that's easy. This is hard work. And it really takes us being uncomfortable and being comfortable being uncomfortable, and then challenging what we think we know, and being willing to really shift when we need to shift. Because there have been many shifts throughout this journey for me. I thought I knew something, and then I experienced someone else in another culture, and then I was like, I went over to Morocco and spent 3 weeks in Morocco, and I was like, okay, I thought I knew about Morocco, but now I know something else. So it's really being pliable and being putting your heart in it. And that, for me, that's what humanity is. It's our human to human connection. It's our willingness to see people as human beings and not as as statistics, numbers, problems, whatever we see them as, human beings first. And our non-human relatives, I think back to the First Nations, and I'm so inspired by them because they saw and understood that the earth was a part of them, and vice versa. And when you talk about their cultural traditions and celebrations, it is so important for us to lift up and amplify that, because there was a genocide. We don't want to use that word or say that word, but that's the reality. There was a genocide. And so we have to stand and hold space for that and figure out how we're going to harvest humanity in the midst of that.
Well, you are using words that at ecoAmerica we absolutely, our motto is start with people, stay with people. And when you talk about the connection between people and Mother Earth, and the connection between us and the natural rhythms and the community, that's exactly what we know moves people to act, because they feel that they are part of that and part of that solution. And so we really bring climate change into the personal, relevant, and close. And that's why the stories were so powerful. And I appreciate your storytelling so much. We've got some fans of yours in the chat who want a copy of the poem for sure. And I think that you will probably go on to write more spoken word about climate change, because it's very powerful. And it does bring people into a space where they can appreciate and also become solutionaries, as you mentioned.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I welcome that feedback, and I thank you for wanting it. I will certainly send it on to you so that you can share it with the broadcast. We are one another's keeper. We truly are, and we have to. And I shouldn't say have to. We get to, because it's a privilege to do the work that I do. It's hard work, but it is such a privilege. It's truly a privilege. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Jennifer, for having me.
Thank you. Wonderfully. And if you're in North Carolina and you go to one of our future North Carolina ambassador trainings, you'll get to hear Eboné as one of our great trainers. So we really appreciate that. Gosh, the session has gone so fast, and I know that everybody listening has been inspired. Thank you again for your stories. Wish you the best and continuing to do that. And I look forward to continuing to work with you on the North Carolina Climate Ambassador Program. So thank you so much, Eboné.
Likewise, thank you.
So those of you watching our Let's Talk Climate series will continue next week, every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The next one coming up is on May 20th, Mothers Know Best, practical advice for climate action. And then the next Path to Positive Communities one will be on June 10th, best practices to engage your community on climate. You can also find all the past episodes on our ecoAmerica YouTube channel, which also has our American Climate Leadership Summit episodes and many more resources. So continue to follow us on the hashtag Let's Talk Climate. Be sure to subscribe and follow us for the latest on leadership, resources, and episodes on climate action and advocacy. From all of us at ecoAmerica, we thank you for listening today. We hope that you stay well and stay safe. Continue to talk about climate change and solutions. We'll see you soon.